All right, folks, this is Chad Young, and this is my Week 4 presentation for MPA 594. We are less alike, my friends, and we are unalike. Well, for my presentation, I decided to compare what will soon be my two alma maters, CBU and UC Irvine. Now for CBU, because it is not really a for-profit college, you might want to substitute a for-profit college whenever I'm talking about it, but this was more fun. All right, there's Graham Allison. So for my thesis, what I want to say is that whether the differences and similarities are important or unimportant really does not matter. What matters is that the similarities are deceptive in that they cover up the differences and lead us to conclude that what should be two different species is one species. So really quick, I want to talk about some of the similarities. We're definitely similar in a lot of the organizational fundamentals. So whether that's Weber and how we structure a bureaucracy and how the hierarchies work within that bureaucracy, or if we're talking about Poscorb and Gulick as far as how to define the job of a manager, or even Mary Parker Follett and her contributions to what ultimately became transformational leadership. All of those things are going to be in common. Those are all similarities of most organizations and how they're structured. Okay, so next let's talk about the differences. So the first one that I think Graham Allison pointed out fairly well is the bottom line, which is for a for-profit university, think University of Phoenix, profit is going to be that primary driver of most decisions. So if they're going to do an educational program, a program, a master's in education, or in some other program, their main question is, can that program be profitable? Are we going to have enough students, and can we provide it at a low enough cost to turn a profit? Now they may make decisions on we're willing to take a loss on this program so that we can support our image as a university, but overall it's going to be profit that drives their decision making. In the UC system, as a public university, the driver is going to be very almost undefinable, but definable in the sense that it is the public good. So they are a repository for knowledge. They're a research institution, and they're also a center of higher learning. Those are a lot of, and I'm sure we can add much more on top of that, but they have a very broad mission, and many of those, in fact, probably all of those, are not profit drivers. So a major difference we can point out here is going to be the Constitution. So as a public agency, it is bound by the elements of the Constitution. So that is going to be a major driver of their decision making, and they're going to have to work within those bounds, whereas a private university and a for-profit college is not going to have as many of those boundaries. Another one is public unions. So most of the public universities are going to have faculty and staff unions that are a big part of the decision-making process. Finally, you're going to be the timelines. As again, Allison pointed out, the timelines of a private university, they can make a 10-year plan for how the university is going to progress, whereas in the public university system, those decisions, those timelines are much shorter because of election. So today we might start a 10-year plan that points us to getting to X, Y, and Z, but tomorrow there might be an election and administrations change, and all of a sudden, all of the missions for that organization have changed. So that is another major complication that public universities face that private for-profit colleges do not. So back to my primary thesis. Here you got a picture of a aircraft carrier. Now, if you were looking for ways to improve upon an aircraft carrier, whether that be in design or operation, where would you look? Would you say, well, an aircraft carrier is basically a giant fishing boat with planes on it and guns? And so we're going to go back and we're going to say, let's go back to the fishing industry and see what they have to say about fixing the operation of this aircraft carrier. No, you would never say that. And oftentimes we assume that we know everything about business, or we've studied everything about business, so let's take those lessons learned and just apply them to this other business we have. And the problem with that is that government and public administration is not another business. It's another animal altogether. So it needs its own research. It needs its own study. You need to start from the ground up. Every time you try to define public administration in business administration terms, you're running the risk of missing the point. You're running the risk of misidentifying things, of saying, I don't even know how to think. I'm a biologist, so you wouldn't try to explain human physiology in terms of a bacterium. It just wouldn't work. But that's what we often do. We're trying to describe the operations of the government in terms of a much smaller organization and private business. So in order to, whether your goal is to understand government from an academic standpoint or to improve upon it, you have to study it in its own space, in its own terminologies, in its own definitions. It needs its own study. You can't just simply say that this is just a modified private business. Well, that's all I've got for this week. Thanks, Lancers, and I'll see you next week.